Menace opens at midnight.
Place in the Star Wars line.
They started lining up over a month ago.
All right, get out your lightsabers.
You just may have noticed that Star Wars, the latest episode, opens nationally at midnight tonight.
And people are revved up.
Okay, shut the fuck up. I'm sure all of you know the story of this movie and its release, and I don't think I could accurately showcase the hurricane of sorrow, disappointment, anger, and other negative emotions that were expressed that week. Let's just say Black Tuesday probably had less suicides. To be honest, there's not much to say about episode 1, and to be honest, I don't think there's really anything I want to say about it, but I guess I promised the Skywalker Saga review, so here we go. I think most people agree it's pretty much one of the worst movies in the saga. As you all probably already know, George Lucas had full control over these projects, and because of that, nobody was there to put him in check, really. You see, I view movie making as sort of like an ecosystem. Every species has its own little niche in its environment, and does their job keeping all the other organisms in line in a beautiful circle of life. And in this equation, George Lucas is the human, the primate that fucks everything up, and has no limitations on its expansion or greed for power, and little did everyone know, this little monkey didn't realize how important everything else was. Now you might be asking, Al, are you saying that you think George Lucas is an ape? Yes. Okay, so what do I say now? The acting is shit, the characters are shit, the special effects are shit. Everything is shit. It's pretty impressive how Lucas managed to make a movie so unbelievably fucking hollow. Also really bizarre how much this movie flip-flops between being dumb content sludge for kids to adult socio-political conflicts and economic turmoil.
We recommend a commission be sent to Naboo to ascertain the truth.
The Congress of Malastare concurs with the honorable delegate from the Trade Federation. A commission must be appointed.
The point?
Excuse me, Johnson.
Because that's what people liked about the original trilogy, right? I think I'm just going to quickly move on to talking about episode 2, but there is one thing I want to touch on before moving forward, and that's the child acting. Now, I'm not one of these dumbasses that just hates kids by default just because they're naturally immature and stupid and rude and disgusting and a drain on your retirement plan. Point is, children in movies are not annoying by default. There are and have been plenty of great child actors who've given excellent performances. But the problem with Hollywood is that the more corporate elements of movie making tend to make it so children aren't hired for their talent. Instead, they're hired either because they look adorable enough or because they're the children of the producers. It probably also doesn't help that finding a good child actor on its own is pretty difficult since, you know, they're children, but that doesn't undercut the fact that this practice is pretty abusive. I'm sure on its own, putting a kid in a situation where they need to act in a multi-million-dollar production is stressful enough, especially when they don't really know what they're doing. But the real problem is when you hire a child actor solely on the basis that they look cute, you end up putting false ideas and expectations in their head, like that they're great actors who are talented enough to play significant roles, when in reality the decision was based on appearance alone and not much else. All this only for them to grow up and slowly realize they can't get any more roles because they're not as talented as they were once led to believe, and that ends up having a massive blow on their confidence and self-esteem. And to those of you who think I'm just pulling this out of my ass for some reason, there is precedent for this. Just look up what happened to Bobby Driscoll, the child voice actor who played the original Peter Pan, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Or hell, just look at what happened to Jake Lloyd, the kid who played Anakin in this movie. His career was pretty much ruined and he faced years of harassment and bullying for his acting, even though he was like fucking 9, all culminating in a mental health crisis that would later land him in jail, all because Lucas can't write good dialogue to save his life. Looking back on this movie, nothing really good came out of it. Everyone hated it. The actor who played Jar Jar Binks almost fucking killed himself. Yeah, it was just kind of a shit show. Second verse, same as the first. This movie sucks. Pretty much the same problems here, minus the annoying children. Unfortunately, we only get one funny, goofy, haha scene with Jar Jar, where he lays the groundwork for the rise of a fascist dictator.
That the Senate give immediately emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor.
The plotline is fucking dumb. So Palpatine wants to kill Padme because she's blocking a bill that would expand his power or some shit. So he hires Count Dooku, who hires a bounty hunter, to hire another bounty hunter, who sends a robot that sends 2 alien worms to kill Padme. Damn, this is some intrigue writing right here. These assassination attempts eventually lead to Anakin and Obi-Wan being hired to act as protection detail for Padme, which ensues a blossoming romance plotline between her and Anakin, and Oh boy. Now, I'm not saying that I'm an expert when it comes to communicating with the fairer sex, but through grueling trial and error, I have gained a little bit of experience when it comes to getting women to like you, at least for half a conversation. Enough that I can say confidently that there's not one fucking reason as to why Padme would like Anakin. Okay, where do I start? He interrupts her to bitch and complain about his boss, almost to the point where he looks like he's gonna start crying. He tearfully confesses his love and begs her for sex even though they've known each other for like 2 days. He's overbearing, overly emotional, rude, and he openly admits to supporting a fascist dictatorship.
We need a system where the politicians sit down and discuss the problem. Agree what's in the best interest of all the people, and then do it.
That's exactly what we do. The trouble is that people don't always agree.
Well, then they should be made to.
By whom? Who's gonna make them?
I don't know. Someone.
You?
Of course not me.
But someone.
Someone wise.
Sounds an awful lot like a dictatorship to me.
Well, if it works.
Damn, bro, save some pussy for the rest of us. To top it all off, he angrily raves about how he murdered several children.
I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them.
See, this guy knows how to talk to the ladies. This is one of the reasons I like Clone Wars, as he's a completely different person, and I can understand why Padme would like him. He's charming, confident, funny, isn't a Hearts of Iron player, and is the type of person that would lead Obi-Wan to remember him fondly.
And he was a good friend.
Like, did you have to make him completely unlikable? I'll talk more about Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationships in a bit, but before that, let's talk about this movie's positive qualities. Christopher Lee as Count Dooku. That's it, moving on. Now, I'm sure everyone is expecting me to talk about how this movie has many redeeming qualities that make it the best of the prequel trilogy, and I do agree with that assertion. But does that make it a good movie?
General, we found the Jedi. They're in hallway 328.
Activate ray shields!
Ray shields. Wait a minute. How did this happen? We're smarter than this.
Apparently not.
No. I'm willing to bet that most people only remember this movie fondly because of the Clone Wars, and the reason I think that is mainly due to the fact that defenders of it will cite arguments that only apply to Clone Wars. Let's go over a few. Anakin and Obi-Wan's dynamic is good. What? I mean, they're not constantly bickering at each other, which is good. But what is there to say really about their relationship outside of the Clone Wars? I'm sorry, but one or two scenes where they say nice things to each other or reference events that we never see is not enough to justify Obi-Wan seeing Anakin like a brother, especially considering the scenes in the last movie.
I was beginning to wonder if you'd got my message.
I retransmitted it just as you had requested, Master. Then we decided to come and rescue you.
Good job.
We have a job to do!
I don't care! Put the ship down!
You will be expelled from the Jedi Order!
I can't leave her!
Come to your senses!
Made him, well, arrogant.
In fact, Obi-Wan only trained Anakin in the first place because his master told him to. Isn't that a totally different situation as to what you described later?
When I first knew him, your father was already a great pilot, but I was amazed how strongly the Force was with him. I took it upon myself to train him as a Jedi.
Clone Wars was able to highlight the positive qualities in Anakin's character so much better than this movie. We saw examples of his brilliant tactical mind and how he used it to overcome obstacles during the war, and we were shown the wonderful, empathetic side of him that made him able to bond with characters like Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, including the clones that served under him, and that's all while highlighting the elements of his darker side too. But in these movies, we have one scene where he tells the clones to aim for the fuel cells.
Aim right above the fuel cells!
Duh, aim for the fuel cells. Well, no shit, dumbass. You think they don't know that? Alright, what else? Oh, a couple scenes where they explain to the audience how many wonderful adventures they had together.
Felt you this tense since we fell into that nest of gundogs.
You fell into that nightmare, Master, and I rescued you, remember?
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry, but without any context, it really seems more like Anakin is just a tumor on Obi-Wan's life that he's burdened with until he becomes old enough for him to finally fuck off. And I wouldn't blame him, honestly. Another argument I hear is, oh, Anakin's turn to the dark side is so tragic and sad. I mean, yeah. Because we saw Clone Wars. When I was a lot younger, I remember my first introduction to Star Wars being the Clone Wars. And when I watched these movies, Anakin's fall to the dark side only provoked a strong reaction in me because of what I saw of him in that show. It showed his loyalty, his compassion, his infinite capacity to love. It showed bonds he had with the people around him that were ultimately corrupted by Palpatine's psychopathic influences. It's this development that generates a painful reaction in us when seeing Anakin like this. I seriously doubt people would have cared as much if we only saw these shitty movies. Then we have all the other problems, namely the bland set design and camera work. I hope you like shot reverse shot because that's all this movie has to fucking offer. Seriously, move the camera around, get a better angle, have the fucking characters do something besides standing around. Jesus Christ, anything! And it's such a shame because there are really positive qualities to this movie, including some that were in the last two. The CGI is noticeably improved, even though you can tell the characters are in a green screen most of the time. They have great actors with arcs that do have weight. Not only that, an intriguing plot when it comes to Palpatine's plan to create the Empire. Palpatine went from being this admittedly cliche villain to a man hellbent on ultimate power, who can masterfully control both sides of a conflict to gain that power, all while manipulating those around him to fall into his extremism. Now, I know a lot of people don't really like what they did with lightsaber fights, just because they don't really match up with the originals. But like, who cares? I need to give credit where credit is due and say they did a great job with these fights. Like, yeah, the pacing of them is really shit at times, but you can tell that this was the one element of the trilogy that they actually cared about. I can only imagine the hours they spent training these actors to perform the stunts and incorporating them into the movie. Yes, it's different, but the way movies are presented needs to grow and evolve over time, and this is just one of the ways they've done it. But it's really unfortunate because that's all the presentation really has to offer. These movies had a potentially great story behind them, but they lack so much in presentation that they never really succeeded in providing Star Wars fans with a narrative that gripped them emotionally. And while I'm happy these movies create ideas for new projects for this universe to come to fruition, we should all still recognize that these movies were a mistake. I started this review thinking that George Lucas is just a money-grubbing hack who had very little to do with the creation of this series and only cares about selling toys, but I came out with a more nuanced perspective than before. He was clearly in over his head, and the people around him utterly failed to criticize his decisions.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
Perhaps I would go as far to say he was downright lazy. But he was responsible for a lot of great projects that came after, so perhaps he's just the type of person that just needs that extra spark of imagination from the people around him. And while I generally think that directors should have more control over their work, there is no I in team.